You are live. Hello, peoples. Hope there are some people there. Welcome to the Jazz Guitar Hour at UIS. I'm Jose Gopo. I'll be here playing and talking for the next hour. So let's see. I think I have sound. Last week I made an amateur mistake of just for 5 minutes without noticing that there was no sound. So can you hear me? If you want to say, good way to force you to interact a little bit. If there's anybody there, if you can hear me, say something. But I think I can because I see green things on the microphone thing. Okay, let's see. Is it 6 o'clock? It's 6 o'clock. So I'm gonna start. I got a request for a song. My friend, actually, I can't deny because it's the person who sold me this guitar, Valdir Júnior Juninho, from my hometown Uberaba. So I'm gonna play a song called "Round Midnight" by Thelonious Monk, and then talk about it. Cool. Hmm. All right, so Round Midnight by Thelonious Monk. What about that tune? It has been recorded throughout jazz history 1,068 times. And it's a good one that people always argue about what are the correct changes. Because there is a version on the real book that people argue that it's not that the changes are not correct. So it's fun. Jazz controversy. A couple of choices. Let's see. You can play. Well, I think the first, most people I think agree on right now. You could go to E flat minor, just make it a 2-5, or you could instead of going to you could go to C half diminished. So C to F. So the option number 2 from top. Option number 2. Um, there are other points that people argue, but basically, what I think it's a good idea is just check out as many versions as you can. When you're learning a song, and then make up your mind. Like you can either choose your own harmony or make a combine a few different versions. I think that's was kind of what I did here. Um, a little shout out to a little nod to Wes Montgomery. I think Wes recorded in the key of the tune is normally played in E flat. I'm positive Wes played in E minor. I could be wrong though. It could be the recording on YouTube. My guitar is never in tune. So yeah, that's why he does this section here a little like. Anywho, so that was Round Midnight. Let me know if you have questions about it. I think I just played that once again. Shout out to Valdir Jr. Who requested. Now, one that I wanted to play and discuss as well a little bit. Song. Well, probably most of you are aware that we lost the great Chick Corea this week, right? So, Jason Brewer looking great. Good haircut, nice brother. Right on, Jason. Good. Thanks for coming up. I look good, so imagine if I looked bad. Um, where everybody's sad about the loss of a great player. But I don't know. I like to think of him, a player of that caliber. Of a Chicoria, like in the same way as I think of Thelonious Monk, or the same way that I think of Bill Evans or Miles Davis or Louis Armstrong. It's like they're all gone, but their music, it's the presence. I don't know, when we talk about Miles Davis or we talk about John Coltrane or Wes Montgomery, I don't know. I feel like they're. It's kind of like they're still alive. And I think the same applies to Chick Corea. And so one song of his called Humpty Dumpty. So All right, Humpty Dumpty. So it's a little bit of a tricky song. The chord progression here a little bit unusual. E flat major goes down half step. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for joining. Goes down half step, and then it goes to G flat major, down half step. So I'm not a music theory expert, so sometimes I see when people try to explain the meaning behind the chords, like, oh, a half cadence going. To me, sometimes it's hard to make sense of in a progression like that, like. And then after those four major seven chords, it goes to A7, and then B flat major 7, and then 4 bars of B flat minor 7. And then a cycle of minor chords: D minor to B minor to A flat minor. Hang there for a little. And then F minor, so all moving in minor thirds. And then back to A flat minor, 2 5 to E flat, and then 2 5 to back to E major. So I don't know if there's a straight correlation. I know Chick Corea played with Joe Henderson in the late 60s, and Joe Henderson. Just this song makes me think of the changes of Inner Urge, Joe Henderson's Inner Urge. In case you're not familiar, check that out. Inner Urge is, maybe I'll play it later. It's kind of modal, but the second section of the tune has what reminds me, what makes me connect those two tunes. It's this section of Inner Urge when it goes like. So it's like it's one the same quality of chords. In the case of Humpty Dumpty, it was minor 7 chords, moving in minor thirds. But in case of Inner Urge, was major 7 chords. Well, not only minor thirds, like a combination. And then in the just the sound, it's reminiscent. I think those two songs. Maybe there is a thesis there to be written. I don't know. I'm not gonna write it. But I think it's interesting to think about the connection between Joe Henderson's Inner Urge and Chick Corea's Humpty Dumpty. So this type of tunes that have too many chords, like chords moving, chord, 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 and another chord, and another chord. It's really good to get your scale, your chops together in terms of when you're switching from one scale to another. Because if you're using to playing songs like Autumn Leaves, you can hang out on the G major scale here and everything kind of fits. Play some chromatic notes, but on a tune like Humpty Dumpty, it changes all the time. So it's a good exercise to keep your ears sharp. That's the whole form. What else? And it's not only scales. That's also a fantastic, like a reason for epic fights in the jazz community about the use of scales or chord tones or motif. Like, so there are some people that are really against thinking about scales, which I think it's funny because the scale. I mean, scales have 7 mostly. Like they're like diatonic scales have 7 notes, right? So for this chord here, we're playing seven notes. Yeah, the chord, a major 7 chord has 4 notes. The scale has 7. So that's advanced mathematics. You just add three notes to the major seven chords, and you have the entire scale. So I don't understand the fuss of like being against scales, because if you play the scales in thirds, that's the arpeggios, and that's another like, in order to really showcase the sound of the chord, if you just run the scales, sometimes that's not enough, you know. And I mean, it sounds extremely mechanical, especially the way I'm doing right now. But if you play arpeggios, though, like you can hear the chord. All right, that's just ways to navigate. People wonder like, oh, how do I? It's kind of tricky to imagine how to improvise over this type of things that move so much. But I guess you can start with scales and arpeggios. You know, like I'll try to play a couple of chords only using chord tones, and let's see if I can make something melodic. Maybe just one chorus of just the chords first, so we can get it in our ears. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Chord tones. One more. Okay. Yeah, I cheated a little bit because I used nines as well. Well, it's still chord tones. So just, yeah, a couple of ideas to play over Humpty Dumpty. Let me see. Let me switch my Portuguese mode here. Alright, valeu, Juninho, valeu por aparecer aí. Vamos que vamos. Okay, switch back to English. And what else? Maybe play another tune and see what comes up. That sounds like a good idea. I wanted to talk about a couple of patterns today, but I'll talk about them later. Think of a tune here. Since we're okay talking about Korea, just connecting. This is a type of language, this type of chord changes, and the melody. This is late. This song I think was composed in the 70s. So it's, in terms of jazz history, it's extremely modern. Like it's a language that, it's not the same language that the bebop language, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, a little bit older, still extremely sophisticated, but different. When you this type of songs, like when you talk about the harmonies, the in bebop, it's a little bit easier to see the relationships, if you between the chords. If you play a song like, let's say, any bebop, like a lot of, I already talked about it, but we're gonna come back to it a lot. The way bebop players play the blues. Like all those changes, the harmonic progressions have a little bit the logic behind them. It's like a little bit easier to explain, you know. than the harmonies in a little bit more modern jazz. Um, I'm sure you can find if you want to find like a harmonic analysis for Chicorea's Humpty Dumpty, but I don't wanna know it. Like I like listening and playing along and trying to get, to me it's like to explain the reason behind each word. Sometimes it could be a little tricky. But speaking of a little bit of a more modern language, one song that it's a really great point to me to think about to start diving into this type of more modern language is Herbie Hancock's Dolphin Dance. So I'm gonna play Dolphin Dance and see what happens. Okay, so that was Herbie Hancock's Dolphin Dance. And in case you know the tune, you see the ending here, the correct ending. That's the way Herbie recorded on his album. I think that's the name of the album, Dolphin Dance, 60 something, 64. It's George Coleman on saxophone, Tony Williams on drums, Ron Carter on bass. Uh, this ending reminded Valdir of Leo Brower. Okay, classical. Yeah, I was gonna talk about the ending. Good point. So, because the ending, usually people end on this little vamp here. It's B minor to A minor over E. But I what did I do? Oh, the thing is, when you're playing by yourself, you can go anywhere. It doesn't really matter. It's not gonna even. I played a few chords sounded wrong. They were wrong. But by itself, like see a little good old open string ringing. You usually can play any chord, like say or keep the same shape. This is random guitar tips. Literally, just move, play whatever. But it has some meaning behind it, though. I'm not that random because there's a recurring element. So what doesn't matter whatever happens. Consistency. Um, okay, going many different avenues. Uh, but the final chord that I played here, I recycled the chord that Herbie uses on the song. There's a very interesting chord who it's an E flat major 7. And it has a sharp 5. If you guitar players recognize this shape here, it's normal sharp 5 chord. However, not that normal because it has a natural 5 on top. So there's a sharp 5 and not the natural 5. Fairly dissonant chord. And this sound here, that sounds like it comes from the diminished scale, doesn't it? But that's not a. Let's see. Yeah, it's still pretty strange because the root he's playing. If he was playing only this shape, this voicing here, then fine, it's diminished or dominant diminished. But he's playing the root on E flat, which is not on the scale. Just makes up an interesting mix. Maybe we can play the augmented scale here. Uh, okay, dolphin dance. Little water. How about little water? Talking makes you thirsty. Um, so yeah, I think one thing important that I notice in youngster jazz students, um, one thing that I think it's important and sometimes missing is acknowledgement of just different types of groups, like important groups in jazz history. You know, not necessarily from like a jazz history book, but just a couple of groups that stand out in my mind that are important to me. Of course, there are thousands of other groups that may be important to other people, but I think of just to be able to hear, for example, the Bill Evans trio. Any formation of the Bill Evans trio with Scott LaFaro on bass and Paul Motion on drums, or with Eddie Gomez and Martin Morell. But Bill Evans, there's a lot of material if you just and just let's just if we can just talk about piano trios or Thelonious Monk, the type of sound that Thelonious Monk would play, or think of Oscar Peterson, or think of um, oh man, I'm forget what's the name of the crazy blind piano player who played Art Tatum. So think of that sound, for solo piano. Uh, I mean, other name, just like recognizing sounds, like recognizing the sound of English, with accents, like it's easy to recognize for Brazilians, people who speak English with a Brazilian accent, so that's pretty specific. So hearing like the Bill Evans trio and recognize that's a Bill Evans trio with Eddie Gomez on bass. I don't know. So that's I think it's important to recognize like the sound of the Miles Davis quintet in the 50s, and with Red Garland on piano and Paul Chambers on bass, and then recognize the sound of the Miles Davis quintet in the 60s with Tony Williams on drums, Ron Carter on bass, Herbie Hancock on piano. So, or the John Coltrane quartet, these iconic groups that created a specific sound. So, because it's not, if you just say jazz, what is it supposed to mean? It doesn't mean anything. It could be. And why am I talking about this? Because I mentioned this type of changes that I played on Humpty Dumpty. Maybe chromatic, I don't know. So this type of vocabulary of more modern jazz. Uh, Back to the thing that I wanted to talk about in Humpty Dumpty, though, that I didn't. I made a connection with Inner Urge, which is also, let's see, Inner Urge. I think it was recorded a little. Joe Henderson's Inner Urge was recorded a little before, in the very early '60s, like '61 or '62, by Joe Henderson. It's before Herbie Hancock's recording of Dolphin Dance that I just played. And it has this on Inner Urge and on Humpty Dumpty that I played earlier. There's this thing of, I guess I already talked about, of one quality of chord, either major seven or minor seven or diminished, moving in a certain fashion. On the bridge, on the second half of Humpty Dumpty, he does D minor to B minor to A flat minor, and then F minor. So those, he's using the diminished. So it's like, it's not tonal, it's not easy to explain in terms of, but it has elements that work as a glue together. I mentioned that I was gonna play Inner Urge, so let me give it a try. Speaking of, well, just it's hard to not be thinking of Chick Corea all the time. Now, if you haven't checked it out, go check out Joe Henderson's Big Band album, which has Chick Corea on piano on a few tracks, and it's him on piano on Inner Urge, and it's just very, very ridiculous soul. Um, yeah, and it's a cool big band album. So Inner Urge, Joe Henderson. Inner Urge, Joe Henderson. Fairly complicated tune. And the execution, I gotta go back to it and shed. That's good. So it has this thing like, I don't know what's the rhythmic figure, but it's kind of hard to solfege that. If anybody's a solfege master, that's a good one for you too. Like, um, cool. It made me think of another song that Joe Henderson also recorded. Now, okay, so to make a bridge back, driving back to a little bit more traditional vocabulary, um, to see the how like a different approach. You know, when you're playing when you say modern jazz, you know, jazz in the '60s, the way it's McCoy Tyner on the recording of the original recording of Joe Henderson's Inner Urge, and Elvin Jones on drums, but the way and Bob Cronshaw on bass, the way they are playing, you know, it's extreme. Like it's the '60s. Probably most of us, when talking about the cars, if you think of cars in the '60s, it's something old school, right? Something vintage. But jazz in the '60s, it was already very, very sophisticated. You know, people nowadays are still trying to catch up with what was happening. So these types of harmonies, you know, like he starts in a, oh yeah, so it opens up room for many more like very open harmonic possibilities. And if you're used to modern classical music, not just to make the even more of a amalgam of topics of modern classical music, you know, like this is not, of course, for jazz players, maybe this type of chord that Joe Henderson actually uses on Inner Urge, a D flat, major 7, sharp 9. He doesn't use it on the blowing section, on the improvisation, but he plays that chord on the melody. And for people that, you know, we're talking about 1960, early 60s. So for people that are used to listen to Bartok, Stravinsky, and Schoenberg, like, you know, what is this? This is like the most. It sounds like a C major for people that are used to modern classical music. And those jazz players, McCoy Tyner, Herbie Hancock, they all listen to modern classical music as well. So it's all connected, one world. So to bring this back to a little bit of a more diatonic language, I'm gonna play Without a Song, which is a jazz standard and was recorded by Joe Henderson in the '60s. And it was also recorded by Joe Henderson again on that big band album that I mentioned, which is from the '90s, maybe '91, which is a beautiful album. And so Without a Song. The version that I have in my mind that I listen to the most, I will stop talking and start playing very soon. But last thing is Sonny Rollins on the album The Bridge with Jim Hall on the guitar. All right. Oh man, sometimes it's hard to resist playing by yourself, just going from tune to tune. You know, when I used to play solo guitar a lot at a place in Urbana called Pizza M. I play there every Friday, and sometimes with guests, with friends, and sometimes just by myself. And it's fantastic. You just like play, like just close your eyes and play, and it's fun. Sometimes I would forget that there are people there. There would be people there, and but like try to play something to please myself, but like keeping them in mind somewhat, you know. And sometimes it would be great to see the reaction, you know, like sometimes you never know if people are paying attention or not. But solo guitar, it's very fun. And as I was playing a couple, like that was someday my points to come in place after without a song, because I talked about Joe Henderson and he recorded that. And I don't know. I play the pedal. When I play the pedal to end without a song, I felt like just reminded me of the Miles Davis recording of "Someday My Prince Will Come." It starts like that. Uh, okay. So one thing that I used here a little bit, that just bouncing between the tune is a waltz. It's in 3/4. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2. You can flip between 3/4 and 4/4. You know, like 2 3 1. If you start playing like 1 2 3 So basically, yeah, if you're playing, if you put in your metronome here, where what is it? I don't know, 76. Uh, so if your metronome is here, if you're thinking of 1 2 3 on every 4 beats, if you're playing 4/4, so 1 2 3 4. Now, if you want to keep the metronome right there, wherever that tempo was, but now think of that thing that the metronome, the click, think of it as the dotted uh, quarter note. Yes, the dotted quarter note. So 1 2 3, pa 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 pa. Is it right? Pa pa pa. That's right. 1 2 3 pa pa. that was the click. So ba ba 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 from the top 1 2 3 1 2 3. Oh man, now I'm messing up harmony. 1 2 3 1. There you go. Ba, 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 ba. So all the tempos are interchangeable. Um, yeah, a little water and let's close. Do you guys have any requests? Anything? Any questions? This thing happens every Wednesday. Come rain or come shine or come snow or come anything, I'll be here. Uh, Sometimes I can. I mean, there. As I said in the very beginning, in the first episode, I played just the blues, and I could do just the blues for the entire semester. So, and I'm talking like tune like modern jazz tunes. You know, that could lead into many topics. Oh, see, so let's close with. Let's see. Well, maybe just a teaser for next week. Like I can talk about a few approaches to play over giant steps. How about that? That's a song that people either love or hate because it's being maybe overplayed. But in my opinion, it's a great exercise. To know just tying it together with, and this is 1959 giant steps. So it's before Chick Corea's Humpty Dumpty and before Joe Henderson's Inner Urge. That's where the chord changes start to get crazy. Just like changing fast. And there's a cool story in case you don't know. On the original recording of this, it was a very, I mean, the progressions of jazz in the 50s, the progressions that people were used to listening with stuff like, 2 5 1s, maybe 2 5 to the 4, and then the 4, this type of harmonies that's kind of like the sound in the 50s, right? And then John Coltrane wrote something like this. Crazily fast, and the chords like far away from each other. So the piano player that on the original recording on the album Giant Steps is Tommy Flanagan. Extremely high demand, accomplished, played with everybody, played with Sonny Rollins, like so. And he was on that recording. He was like, there's a story, I don't know how much it's true or not, that Coltrane came to him a few weeks or days before the recording, told him that, hey, I wrote something a little bit unusual, a little bit different. Do you want to check it out before? But back then they were used to just going to since they kind of knew the standard forms and everything, they were used to just going to the studio and recording, right? And Tommy Flanagan said, no, like I don't need to check anything before. Like I know my stuff. So, but he went to the recording, and he saw the chord changes, which were unusual, but he thought it was a ballad. He was expecting to be like something slow, right? But it wasn't. So the recording, you can see him really, really struggling to go through the changes. So, anyways, enough jazz history. Thank you for joining. I'm gonna finish with whatever happens over giant steps. And thank you. I'll see you next time. Great. See, when you're playing by yourself, anything goes. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.